Hi, everyone, and welcome. Welcome. I'm Suzanne Boyd, the founder and CEO at Antho-Tech, and I am so glad you are all here with us for Global Accessibility Awareness Day. Today marks the 14th Global Accessibility Awareness Day, and the purpose of this day is to get all of us talking and thinking and learning about digital accessibility and inclusion, and that's what we're going to be doing today. And I'm so glad you could join, and so many of you. Now, you may have noticed we called this session Getting Started with Digital Accessibility, Small Steps, Serious Traction, because we know that's the hardest part, is the getting started. Where do you begin? How do you prioritize what to tackle first in the midst of so many other competing priorities and these days some serious constraints as well? Now, accessibility is a topic that is incredibly close to our hearts here at Anthro-Tech. For more than 25 years, we've worked with mission-driven organizations to create digital experiences that work for everyone, including people with disabilities. And so today we're here to either help you take that first step on your accessibility journey or to encourage you to keep going, right? And you are going to be hearing some real honest stories from two incredible government leaders who are not just talking the talk, but are actively walking this path. And so please join me in welcoming Janet Shimabukuro, who is the Assistant Director of Communications, Customer Experience and Communications at the Washington State Department of Revenue, and Becky Bean, who is an accessibility consultant at the Colorado Office of Information Technology. Becky and Janet, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So glad you could be here. We're going to get started with just a couple of questions so we can get to know our panelists a little bit better. And I want to start with you, Janet. If you could share with us who you are, what you do, and how accessibility fits into your day-to-day work.
Sure. Thanks, Suzanne. So as Suzanne mentioned, I'm Janet Shimabukuro, and I lead the Customer Experience and Communications Division at the Washington State Department of Revenue. So we handle internal and external communications for the agency. We manage the agency's websites, we design forms, agency templates, and we also conduct voice of the customer research. So because digital accessibility falls directly in line with customer experience, usability, and plain language work, this fits best within my division.
Oh, thank you. And how about you, Becky?
So hi, I'm Becky Bean. I am an accessibility consultant at the Colorado Governor's Office of Information Technology. And as a part of the Technology Accessibility Program, accessibility is my everyday life. And so we work with State of Colorado agencies on implementing their accessibility plans. And I'm also the product owner of one of our accessibility evaluation tools.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us, Becky. I have a little bit of a crush on the state of Colorado in terms of where you are at with digital accessibility. Before we get started with the conversation, we would like to know who's in the room today. So we're going to pop a question in the chat. If you could share your name, share your role, and which stage you are at in your accessibility journey. So that would be a 1 if you're just starting to learn about accessibility, a 2 if you're familiar with accessibility but haven't implemented it much yet, a 3 if you're actively working on accessibility in your projects, and 4 if you are rocking it, your experience, you're leading accessibility initiatives. Go ahead and share with us. I see some 4s, I see some 2s, I see some 1s. Great variety in the room. Thank you again for joining us. Wow. Let's start by talking about some wins. Becky and Janet, I personally invited you to this panel because you have both been successful in getting traction with digital accessibility in your organizations, in spite of some serious hurdles. So if you could start out by sharing with us an example or two of recent accomplishments in digital accessibility. And Janet, let's actually start with you.
Sure. So for years at Department of Revenue, we'd been doing some grassroots efforts internally with our existing resources to grow our knowledge in this area. I would say that we have some knowledge but lack deep expertise. We'd been collecting job announcements for digital accessibility coordinators that other agencies had been recruiting for in hopes that one day we could recruit for our own and have a dedicated person for this work. We did our own maturity assessment to help us really understand kind of where we were as an organization. And in doing that, discovered that one of the areas that we were weakest was in our executive sponsorship. So, when the Department of Justice ruling was issued and the deadline of April 2026 became clear, it really lit the fire for me that it was my responsibility to make my peers and our agency leadership aware and seek their support. So you don't ask, you don't know what you can get if you don't ask. So I went in and basically said, look at what other agencies are doing and they're hiring full-time digital accessibility coordinators. Can we do this? And I was told, well, first we need to take a step back to scope out the work to be done. So here in Washington, our central IT agency is WATech, similar to Becky's office in Colorado. And they had some vendors on the statewide contract, obviously Anthro-Tech being one of them. So that led to conversations and a discussion to create a phased approach to the work. And all was looking good. We were going to get a multi-phase contract, but then came the spending and hiring freeze. And it was very possible that we were going to get nothing. But thankfully, through a lot of work and convincing, I was able to get our agency's leadership to understand that we couldn't afford to wait. And we had to at least enter into this first phase to conduct a digital accessibility review of our key external assets for starters. So that was a huge win for us. It was like, yes, we're finally going to get going and get some help. So we're just wrapping up that assessment now, and we've begun remediation.
Thank you for sharing that, Janet. That was a serious hurdle right there.
Yes,
I might come back to that. Let's go to Becky.
Well, thank you. So, in the state of Colorado, in addition to the federal rules, we had a bill that was passed. It's House Bill 211110, laws for people with disabilities. And so, when that passed, OIT put together at the time a team of two employees, and one of their first things they wanted to do was get together and figure out, now that we're hired, now what? And so they first decided to do an open office hours to reach out to all the different state agencies. And so originally it was just a small group of 15 to 20 people, one person from each agency. At the time, I actually worked for the Colorado Department of Revenue, so I joined the office hours as a participant. And over the course of the last almost 4 years now, we've been meeting once a week to talk about accessibility. And now that group has grown from 15 to 20 to the invite list has about 450 to 500 people on it.
Wow.
And we have usually 100 to 120 people join us each week to talk about accessibility.
Wow, that is so impressive. And a great example of small steps, serious traction, starting out with 2 people, snowballing to 500. We're going to dig into that a little further as well. But these are both great examples of how the path can seem somewhat daunting at first. Progress is possible if you start small and worth celebrating. So that brings us to the core of today's conversation, which is where and how do you kickstart your accessibility efforts? What I'm seeing from a lot of our partners is it can feel very, very overwhelming, so many barriers that the fear of not knowing where to start can actually stop us in our track. So my next question here is, how did you tackle those initial challenges and push past them and get started? And let's start with you, Janet, on that one.
Thanks, Suzanne. So I would say don't let the fear of not being an expert paralyze you into inaction. So to be frank, I really experienced imposter syndrome today, feeling like I'm not worthy to be speaking here on this panel. But what I'll say is you don't have to have it all figured out. It's okay to start from where you are. It's just a matter that you do something. Something's better than nothing. Do what you can to get started, to push forward. So something that we did a few years ago when the budget was a little bit better, we did a small accessibility review of our secure online services. Thankfully, we're able to successfully implement some, but not all of those recommendations. But one of the biggest takeaways from that work that I found of great value was an accessibility video clip that we had with a visually impaired customer using JAWS screen reader software. And I show it at every agency overview training as a way to build awareness among staff that wouldn't have an opportunity to see somebody use that software and the challenges that they experienced. So my suggestion would be to ask yourselves what proactive and reactive steps that you can take today. So proactively, find your allies in your organization. If this work aligns with your agency's mission and goals, describe how. Look for some data to support your argument. Do you have complaints coming in? If so, gather those and share them. And then following up on customer complaints is more of the reactive, and see what you can learn and glean from those. And perhaps there's going to be some changes and fixes you can spread around your organization. You all know your organization's best and what motivates leaders to action. So build your case around that and anticipate the questions that they'll have.
Yeah, sounds, Janet, like you did a really good job of shining a light on the customer's experience by sharing those video clips, by sharing quotes, by sharing complaints.
Mhm.
Why do you think that was so powerful?
Well, in our organization, one of the things I'd say is we pride ourselves in the customer experience. It's part of who we are as an organization. Years ago, we developed a customer experience vision with the help of employees, and that's to build relationships and power success. It's one of our 4 agency goals, and this work fits right in. So it would go against who we are as an organization to say, no, we don't care, or that's not important. So it really, I think, just reminding people that you may not hear that much about it, but we're hearing from these few people that complain, but there's a whole lot more that aren't able to access our services that we're not hearing from, and that's not okay. They don't
Yeah,
have a doorway, and so, yeah, just bringing it out and making it, like you said, shine the light, and so others can see that this is something we really have to pay attention to.
yeah. Thank you, Janet. For you, Becky, I'm sure your start wasn't without hurdles either. So can you share with us how you pushed past those initial barriers?
Yes. So, like a lot of people, when I first started this work, I didn't set out to be an accessibility professional. At the time, I was a communications specialist at the Department of Revenue in Colorado. And just one of my jobs was to monitor what was going on in the legislature, and just watch the bills and come up with summaries for folks. And I saw this bill, 211110, just going through the legislature with a speed that was really uncommon, and it caught my attention. And so I looked it up, and I was just like, wow, this is a really important bill that could help so many people. And it was just so neat to see. So what I did is I put together, my usual legislative comms packet, and I pitched the bill to my supervisor, who at the time was the director of communications, and I just explained to her the why behind why it was so important, why we needed to pay attention to it as an agency, and really it was an opportunity to demonstrate that we could live our values at the state of Colorado, and then ultimately. Because of that pitch, I got put in charge of accessibility for the Department of Revenue, and that's how I ended up coming over to the Governor's Office of Information Technology, was by being in charge of the project and then being recruited to the team when they formed the team.
Wow, thank you, Becky. That's an incredible story, and how far you've come. Those are some good practical suggestions to get it started. I'd like to sort of pivot right now to challenges. A lot of organizations are experiencing roadblocks to even get started. So what is a common barrier that you've seen, and how do you recommend overcoming it? And let's start with you on this one, Becky.
Well, the most common barrier is something I think a lot of folks can relate to. It's the time and money barrier. It is a tough sell to be like, hey, boss, let's spend a lot of money and a lot of time on this thing. And so what I recommend folks do is really try to figure out what aligns with your organization's values, what motivates your individual managers. So, for example, at the Department of Revenue, they are very focused on making sure that they're efficient and good stewards of taxpayer resources. So I made the case for how they can accomplish that mission through accessibility. For example, with voluntary compliance, it's very hard to voluntarily comply if you don't know what you need to do to file your taxes. And so it also costs Department of Revenue across the country, all of them, a lot of resources to try to go and collect for people who are not voluntarily complying. And so by making the case for folks to be able to have better access to government and to understand how they can file their taxes easily and in an accessible way, I was able to both further accessibility in my organization and also satisfy their values as a person. And it's just really about meeting people where they are at and making the case based on what you know that your manager and your organization values.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like between the two of you, there are at least two sort of angles that you're bringing up to make the case. One is sort of the empathy lens, right, of like doing the right thing, but the other too is like advantages to the organization, like your example just now, Becky. All right. How about you, Janet? What are
So
common barriers?
common barrier. So lack of resources, again, which I'm sure resonates with so many. So what I'd share is do what you can, get creative. So an example that I'm really proud of actually came through a complaint that we received. So David was a deaf customer who couldn't do what he needed on our website. And in the complaint, he kindly offered to introduce us to a professor at Gallaudet University. um, and for those that don't know, Gallaudet University is a university in DC for the education of the deaf and hard of hearing. And so through that introduction and that relationship, we contracted to have students review our website. And it, was a rather inexpensive contract, gave us some quick fixes to adjusting our font colors, approving tab order for better navigation on the website, and things like that. So I would challenge you all to be thinking about, are there schools or organizations that you can partner with? And as well, if you have a group of interested employees within your organization, organize yourselves. So here at Revenue, we created a digital accessibility work group, lovingly called DAWG, DAWG, made up of staff who want to learn more and really make a difference. So get creative, involve others. And Suzanne, something else that you had mentioned, and I want to kind of circle back to, I know Becky and I have had a conversation about this is really like change management at its finest. So for those that aren't familiar with ADKAR, it's a great place to start. And those letters stand for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. So where you have to start is with that awareness and desire. And so, shining the light, like we talked about, making people aware, using examples, telling customer stories. And empathy is one angle, but other angles, something else that I care very much about is reputation of our organization. And it's a reputation risk if we're not doing the right thing and making our site and our tools accessible. And then on the other side, there's also fear of getting sued. It could be very costly. We could have costly litigation that ends up, forces us to do what we should have done to start with. So just thinking about it through all those different angles and really mastering your elevator speech to be able to share with others.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing up organizational change management, and that's one model. There's other models because it's not just about getting compliance. It's about a cultural transformation, right?
For sure.
And that takes time. So I want to just acknowledge a comment in the chat here and encourage everyone, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. We do have a dedicated 20 minutes set aside for Q&A, but Kasha brings up the importance of strong leadership buy-in. Can you speak to that and for both of your organizations? Was that there? Did it help you accelerate efforts or not?
Oh yeah, like it's where you have to start. I feel like you cannot be successful without that strong buy-in from the top, to say that this is part of the culture. This is what we stand for. Equity inclusion is part of who we are, and this is what we support. And if you don't have that, it's going to be an uphill battle. So yeah, I think it's really important. Becky, your thoughts?
Yeah, I could not agree more. So, in the state of Colorado, our Governor Polis, has this program called Colorado for All, and it's a sort of a broad strokes. Many departments participate in it program, and accessibility fits right into it. And so, as a part of that, we are trying to bring Colorado's people with disabilities into the government. And so, we have a whole slew of also what we call wildly important goals. And one of them this year is specifically dedicated to accessibility. And so not only do we have that buy-in, we're getting that continuous reinforcement too from our leadership team to help us be successful.
Yeah, I love that goal. Which kind of this discussion also reminds me about the importance of having a North Star and connecting your digital accessibility efforts back to your values as an organization, back to your vision, back to your mission. Do you feel that's part of your success potentially in getting some traction? I know you're still all on the journey, but how important is that, making that connection between digital accessibility efforts and your organization's mission values?
So I'll
I
speak.
can,
Oh,
oh,
go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Becky.
Okay, I'll go.
Yeah.
One thing I will talk about that kind of connecting it to our values. We've talked a little bit about empathy, but in the Colorado for All program, part of that is really about fostering empathy. And at OIT, we take that a step further with our empathy lab. And so how that works is it is a whole suite of things. But one thing that we are working to implement right now that I'm so excited about is an actual lab where people can go and experience what it's like to be a person with a disability firsthand. And so we can really reinforce that and continue to strengthen a Colorado for All as one of our organizational values and continue to build that buy-in. And then go ahead, Janet.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that idea so much. I hope we can do something like that here in Washington. Like we talked about the change management aspect, but Suzanne, aligning the work with your agency's priorities. So that customer experience vision that I mentioned, that's now one of our 4 goals. And then from there, we looked at the agency, what are our strategic priorities, and the really that work focusing on customer experience laid the foundation for our 2 newest initiatives in our strategic business plan to ensure customers have meaningful access to all of revenue services and ensure meaningful access for feedback and to raise concerns. So it definitely, that alignment and making sure that our priorities, this is an agency priority, and we value equity and inclusion, and like I mentioned, would go against our culture to ignore the needs. And as public servants, we know it's our responsibility to ensure everyone has access. And so the other thing too, which goes again with change management, I going through that training helped me as a communicator understand the importance of that sponsorship. And so kind of building your sponsorship coalition, so to called, to meet with people and find your allies, others that are like-minded, that are willing to speak up and remind people of the need and bring this into the conversations that are going on in your organization.
Yeah, so you have set up a coalition like that.
Organically, not anything official. Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And can you say more about that, Janet? Is that a group of people that keep digital accessibility in the forefront? Are they dedicated to that? Are they meeting regularly? What does that look like?
Yep. So it's what I would say it started just organically, like, keeping track of who are the people who find this as a priority. And then with the DOJ ruling and the governor's executive order. So then it's organizing to say, okay, so we have our digital accessibility work group, and we have the kind of the group of sponsors that get together on a regular basis to say, how are we doing with all of these things that we have on our plate? How are we moving them forward? And then we'll also have groups aligned around those strategic business initiatives and working on that. So there's a number of different bodies and groups that are getting together and talking about the work at hand.
Yeah, fantastic. I want to pivot a little bit right now, and I know a lot of teams are very focused on April 2026. We have to be compliant, anything, but I'm also seeing a lot of folks recognizing that we need to look way past the 2026 deadline. So, what have you seen work well when it comes to starting to embed accessibility into day-to-day processes and into the culture? And let's go to Becky for that one.
Thank you. Yeah, so Janet brought up the ADKAR model, and I'm also a change management practitioner. And how you really begin to embed it is through the knowledge and ability piece too. So I like to say accessibility is not a side hustle. So really make sure that you bake it into folks' roles. So if someone makes documents as a part of their job, teach them how to do it in an accessible way. If someone's doing web content as a part of their role, make sure they know how to make web content accessible. And then just begin to treat it like that is just a part of how you do your job going forward. And then also importantly, make sure they have the tools and resources that they need to do the work in an accessible way as well.
So training and support. Anything to add
Mhm.
to that, Janet?
So the one thing that for us, it was just overwhelming. It was like, oh my gosh, we have to do everything, but being able to say, well, we're going to focus on external first, and then bring the internal and have a little bit. So that was really helpful for us to be able to kind of piecemeal that, and also just kind of recognizing that, and stating this is going to change. I don't think that people understand how it's going to change the way they do work each and every day, and ultimately become just a regular part of what we do. And hopefully accessibility checkers, as they are now, are already starting to be built into our tools. So it's something that everybody's going to do. And you wouldn't even think of, I mean, I think imagining a future where it'd be inconceivable to create a web page, form, video presentation without ensuring that it's accessible. Similar to the way a builder wouldn't build a public office building without ensuring that it meets ADA regulations today, right? And
Yeah,
so just because there were some that were like, oh, well, internal employees, well, why would they? They're not going to create anything. Well, no, they are. If they're creating anything, they're going to have to make sure this applies to external and internal, and making people aware that this is definitely going to change the way we do business.
yeah, yeah. And I think the other day you gave the example, Janet, of you as a leader needing to role model that too. So when you're giving
Right.
a presentation, right, make sure,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. I mean, went through my own and was like, oh, this is a lot of work to add all that alt text, to these images that I was just throwing into a presentation. And so you build awareness by showing and doing, and then creates that desire and that understanding.
yeah, great. Becky, anything to add to our conversation here around baking accessibility into the day-to-day things, into the culture?
Well, sort of the thing that really struck me is Janet talked about how it would be inconceivable in the future, and that is just such a great goal because when you look back on the in-person ADA, it's inconceivable now that buildings would not have a ramp. And growing up, part of the reason why I'm so passionate about this work is my mom. She has a physical disability, and she acquired it unexpectedly. She had pregnancy complications with my younger brother, and it inhibited her ability to walk. And then so she went really quickly from a business executive at a major hospital system to someone who had to be carried in through the loading dock of buildings because this was just before ADA was signed into law. And so that experience really showed me like the importance of this work, but then also in hindsight, how far we've come. And it's just inconceivable now. Like she has the plates and everything. She can roll up to her space, walk into a building easily now. She was fortunate enough to be able to regain mobility. And it's just inconceivable now that she wouldn't be able to get around easily unaided. So I'm looking forward to a day where accessibility is the same.
Yeah, digital accessibility. Yeah, thank you for sharing that story.
Mhm.
It also explains your passion on this topic. Um, Before we open it up to Q&A in a few minutes, I want to ask one last thing. It seems like we all recognize that this work is a marathon and not a sprint, and progress is not going to happen overnight. And in line with organizational change management models, how can we celebrate small wins and not wait till the very end to pat ourselves on the back, right? So how are each of you recognizing those moments? How do you turn small wins into lasting momentum?
So I
I
can get
can
started with that one, Becky. Okay, sorry. Yeah. So we like to celebrate successes via our agency's intranet or our weekly newsletter. If we get some nice compliments, we like to share them. Also, the example that I shared, that the deaf individual who struggled with our website that led to our engagement with Gallaudet University, that actually won members of my team an award from the Disability Inclusion Network, and that was last year. And so we promoted that within the agency, that the team earned this award by doing this great work and really leaning in to see what could be done, as well as when we do something like convert our special notice documents on our website from PDFs to web pages to make them more accessible. Share that, celebrate that, explain that that's a step toward this bigger goal. Also, like I mentioned, create community through those that are willing and able in the agency, like that digital accessibility work group, and measure your efforts. So right now, what we're doing is figuring out, how much work is to be done, and then we'll be looking at, so this is what's been remediated, but this is what remains. And so just measuring, I think somebody once said, and it's so true, you get what you measure.
Yeah. Yeah, we might dig into that a little bit more, Janet, on the measurement and how you're doing that. How about you, Becky?
Well, celebrating wins is so important, and we try to make space for that. I mentioned the office hours that we do each week. It's on a weekly basis. On a regular basis, we also do a specific segment where we celebrate wins. Like just this morning, we did a whole segment where folks could highlight what they're working on. And also I really like to uplift really neat ideas that the agencies I work with have, like the Colorado Department of Agriculture, for example, did 100 documents in 100 days challenge, where they challenged their employees to remediate 100 documents. And it was just such a neat idea. And then by fostering that, healthy sense of competition too, it kind of gave their employees the opportunity for a win as well. And it just really got them engaged in the work. And so I would continue to celebrate those any way that you could.
Yeah, I love that. That's you're gamifying the challenge and getting people, yeah, to compete a little bit to win that competition. That's great. I want to acknowledge the questions in the chat here. I think maybe we're going to go ahead and open it up, unless there's any other additions from you, Becky and Janet. I'm going to open the floor to questions now, everyone. And I'm going to start with one that is probably for you, Becky. I'm trying to find it. I believe it was Franca asking about tools. Ah, there you are, Franca. What are some of the tools that you use to ensure accessibility for your customers and employees? Becca, would
So
you
there's
share?
there's several tools that we use. I would say when you're first starting out, you could start with something as simple as just a document checker, like in Adobe, it has one. Also in Microsoft products, they also have one, and just start off by checking just the one document and get going with the accessibility. And there's just, in the state of Colorado, we do a lot of automated evaluation to do our ongoing monitoring. And so we have an automated evaluation tool that we use. And then we also always layer in manual. So we do manual testing with qualified human testers, and we also really work through that with our development team too. So it's sort of a twofold approach.
Great. And I would like to see if anyone in the audience has other tools that they might be using. Feel free to come off mute and share with us. We are all still learning. Okay, other questions for our panel?
We had another one in the chat, and it was from Amy. It's directed towards Janet. She said, I'm in Washington too. What resources do you use for training staff on creating accessible documents?
Oh, I wish I had a great answer to that. We are not there yet. So we're looking, I know that the state's working on some training resources, but I have not seen those quite yet. So if others in the room know something that I don't, chime in.
I can make a little plug here. We just heard back from DES today that a training we designed on this topic has been accepted to become part of their learning catalog. So hopefully
Excellent.
that will be a resource coming out soon. And then Becky, how about you? What do you use?
For training in specific, so we are fortunate at the state of Colorado that we were able to develop some training for ourselves from scratch. That is definitely not the general experience, but we really wanted to make sure that we did something that reflected the sort of the Colorado recommendations for how we wanted to do stuff, because we have state laws in addition to the federal. And we did work with a vendor to help us with the initial sort of basic package of information, and then we customized it from there. And now it's we have a whole introductory suite that we've developed over the course of the last 3 years.
Wonderful.
There's
And I see, yeah, go ahead, Brianna.
one more question from the chat, and then we can go to raising your digital hand if you have questions. So this one's from Tara. In terms of remediation, do you have staff members do that? How have you managed that? How do you request that? PDF remediation is a long process, but something we need to look at in our agency. So how does your staff handle remediation? Do they do it?
So I'll take that. So we're just starting now, and yes, the staff are learning how to doing what they can. And I asked my colleague, like, what do we think of all of the areas that we need to do remediation? What, like, do we have the capability in house? And probably for about 80% that we could do in house with our the capability and not necessarily the capacity. So that's one of the things we have to look at. If we don't get existing, or if we don't get new resources to help us do this work, then some other work's going to have to be pushed to the side. We have to be real about that, versus then looking at options if we were to bring in more maybe non-perm staff, or to hire out some of this work, how much more could we accomplish? So there's a lot of learning happening with the work we're doing right now, going through the digital accessibility review. And some of the staff are getting hands-on experience doing the remediation themselves.
And I can add too, yes, at the state of Colorado, our staff is also learning how to do remediation. It is a journey, so definitely recommend starting with like one document and working through it in an introductory training, and then going from there. So it's not something that you can just turn around to someone one day and be like, go remediate documents. It does take some time. And then also we do sometimes utilize vendors to help us if there's a large volume or a time crunch. Especially in Colorado, we have what's called the Colorado Open Records Act, and we have 3 days to respond to those. So for things like that, we've been leveraging vendors as well to help out if there's not someone on staff who can turn around a document in 3 days.
Right. I see a lot of great resources getting shared in the chat. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and keep questions coming. And one way to let us know that you have a question is to raise your digital hand, for lack of a better word. We're monitoring that, or just pop a question in the chat. Okay, Marty, go ahead.
Hi, I didn't really have a question so much as just some feedback. You asked for questions earlier, but I wasn't able to come on mute. One thing I would say is the best thing you can do is download a screen reader and try it. NVDA went by on the resource list, so the link's already in the chat. I'm a web developer, so I use it every day. It's illuminating to navigate a website with the keyboard and realize you're lost until you open your eyes to figure out what happened. So that would be the number one thing as I would recommend to anyone. And then if you are in Washington State, DIN, the Disability Inclusion Network, has an ongoing project right now that I'm aware of, where they're going to be adding a lot of documents in the next like 30 days. Of their high speed right now, because we've got our own executive orders along with the changes that are coming.
Yeah, we do. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. And I think there's a link in the chat to that already. Okay, I'm going to ask a question, Becky, since Marty brought up that suggestion. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Empathy Lab? Is like having people use a screen reader part of what you do?
Yeah, so the Empathy Lab has a lot of facets to it. And one of them is we have a community steering committee for the Empathy Lab, and it's made up of people with disabilities. And the folks are able to meet with the community steering committee and have demonstrations. And it goes well beyond screen readers too. We've demoed things for keyboard only and also speech to text. And in addition to that, there's also exercises on a website where you can go in and try out and really sort of in a low pressure environment, begin to do the work of doing accessibility. And, you know, also one thing that I really like that I can't take credit for, it's from the state of Minnesota, is the keyboard challenge that they have, where you just try to navigate a website with just your keyboard, no mouse. And so that's a really great way to understand how accessibility is with a really low, you know, barrier to entry. So if you're just starting out, that's a really neat way to see how you're doing with accessibility.
Great suggestions. Empathy Lab too. I love that title. I love the whole idea behind it. Anume, I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name. I see your hands up.
Yeah, are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Numi Curry and I work at WashDOT out of the Office of Civil Rights. And we are doing, I'm the project manager on their enterprise project of digital accessibility. So I want to like kind of go back. I would love to hear comments from, you know, both speakers on the cross-functional teams and working together with IT, also disability specialists, and also leadership with that buy-in, and how that coordination looked like as you were doing defining the scope, planning, and just doing a whole, you know, full-blown project plan. So maybe we haven't got as far as remediation and audits and things like that. I would love to hear about that insight.
I think that's a fabulous question, Becky.
Well, I can take that. You pretty much hit the nail on the head with what I do in my role. So how it works at the state of Colorado is once the team of two realized that the scope was going to be much greater than they realized, they recruited folks to become accessibility consultants. And so that's how I came to be there. And we work with our state of Colorado agencies they create their own multifunction teams within their agency. And then we also pull in IT resources. And there is what we call the accessibility adoption plan that we put together. And it's a template that each agency can then customize for their specific mission-driven work. And it's been very successful because it helps to organize it, but it's also flexible enough that it can be customized. And it just was, we covered the IT product lifecycle, but also things like skills and training, governance. And so it really helped to sort of organize the work. And then Janet, it looked like you might have something to add too.
Yeah, so we're still working on it, and so like I said, this initial digital accessibility assessment is giving us really the breadth of the amount of work, but we know that IT is involved, that my division that manages the website is involved, and it's a matter of how do we best organize to get the work done. But executive leadership getting them on board to understand this is a priority, I think, was the initial first step and the most important thing. So while we don't have it worked out yet where exactly the work and the how is all going to get done, and especially for the sustainment beyond the April 2026 deadline, we're getting there. So it takes conversations and figuring out where it fits best. And my biggest thing would be go to your highest level decision makers that need to be the ones to bring the people together that can make the decisions about the resources. You need to get them on board.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anumi, for your question. This sparks a new question for me, which is, I know that some of the platforms we use are third-party platforms, right? They're COTS solutions. They're not necessarily maintained by even your own organizations. How do you coordinate efforts with those external parties?
Something we're doing is creating, just making sure our contracts office is aware. So one is to what we say, stop the bleed with our initial, figuring out where we have work to do with our current vendors and how we can tell them this is what you need to be doing differently and better to change. But then also it's figuring out any new contracts that we have, looking at those VPATs to make sure that they're meeting accessibility standards. So it's continuing that dialogue. And as we know, this isn't a one and done. It's a changing the way we do business to make sure that we're keeping up with the changing standards as well. So like I said, it's we're not there yet in terms of figuring out the how we're going to do it all, but at least that awareness of what's in front of us and what needs to happen, I think is so key.
And building on that, in the state of Colorado, we actually updated our procurement policies to include accessibility as a requirement. We're fortunate in that we have the state law, so we have a lot of great leadership from both the governor's office and the legislature. And so that was very straightforward for us to do, but we actually updated our contract language to include it, so it's now expressly included. And then my team put together, at least for IT vendors, a toolkit that we give to our agencies that kind of takes the Colorado procurement laws and breaks it down for folks, and then sort of layers in IT accessibility on top of that. And it's worked out pretty well, but each vendor relationship needs to be managed independently. So it's not like, oh, we just changed the policies and we're done. Because some of our contracts, we've been with folks for a very long time. And so we want to make sure we maintain the system and the relationship. And so you kind of have to also take a customized approach for each vendor.
Yeah, that's impressive, though, that you were able to change the procurement process or rules. I see a question from, I believe it's Bailey. Go ahead and share your question.
Yes, thank you. My name is Stacia Bailey. I'm the forms manager for DCYA. And this is towards Becky. The template that you were talking about that helped organize your overall ADA project for your organization, is that available? Can you send that to us? Or can you send it to Suzanne that she can send to us? I would love to see a copy of that.
I think I can. I have to double check, but also you can visit our website because we have some of the overview of the different components of the plan. We call them the accessibility planning core criteria on our website, which is oit.colorado.gov/accessibility. So that is at least the building blocks of it. But really and truly, you just focus on governance, skills and training, and your IT product roles, and you will go very far in your planning.
Thank you, Becky.
Yes, thank you very much. And I just want to confirm the site again. It's OIT Colorado. Is that what you said?
oit.colorado.gov/accessibility. If you miss the /accessibility, you'll end up on our main homepage for the entire agency. So
great. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's go to a question from Jean, a little bit more technical question, I think. We work with a lot of redactions for our documents, which trips up screen readers. What are some good practices or resources you can point to for redacted docs and PDFs?
That is a tough question because we are actually actively working on our guidance for that right now. So that is one of those very good questions, and we will get back to you on that.
Sounds good. And if anyone in the audience today has a resource they can share, please go ahead and share it, put it in the chat, or just shout it out. We are winding down a little bit.
Two things I wanted to mention, Suzanne, that I forgot to. I mean, if your organization, if you have a person that's organizational change manager, talk to them, get them involved, as well as potentially an enterprise risk manager, because there's, you know, definitely some risk there. Just trying to think of the different tactics you can take to get traction.
And thanks for that, Janet, because that really reminds me of how I got from being a communications specialist to now working in OIT, which it was a journey. And it really just started with getting all the training that I could possibly take. I basically made it my part-time job to take training to understand this work. And I continue to prioritize my professional development. So definitely keep learning and keep growing.
Oh, that's great. Wonderful. Well, I'm going to wrap things up. Thank you everyone for joining us today and for a very engaging discussion and lots of great questions. I'd like to leave you all with just a few takeaways from the session today. One for me for sure is start small. But start, right? Even simple steps like having a regular meeting like you have and Becky, or making one document accessible can go a long way. Second is use what you have, meet people where they are, leverage your existing sponsors and communication leads, office hours to get started. And then last but not least is keep it people focused. While I know fear of lawsuits can be a real concern and a real motivator, I think true accessibility is driven by empathy. And so I want to encourage all of us to not think of this as compliance and checklist, but think about the humans that we're trying to involve in this, keep them front and center. So thank you all for joining us. Please check your inbox in the coming days. We'll send some resources your way as well as a recording. And a big, big thank you to Janet and Becky for joining us, for taking the time, for sharing your stories. You are an inspiration, and let's keep the momentum going, and happy Global Accessibility Awareness Day to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.